So the first thing I want to do is I need to establish the width, the overall width, like what's the widest part of this ring, and how wide is it going to be. And with that, I am going to make it, wider than the widest point. That way, if there's any adjustments I need to make, I'll go ahead and do that at that time. So what I'm going to do is I got this thing at the width approximately, so I'm going to just score this pretty much all the way around, but then I'm going to cut it at an angle with my little jig box there, and so now that we have our little slab cut, the next thing to do is to get it to the appropriate size that we want. And there are several different ways of getting that reamed out. The method I use with good success is I just use this bladed mandrel. I'm going to make it a size 7.5 because it is going to be a bigger ring, and just want to accommodate for that size. And you can always, this is going to be a ring that you can size up or down with little to no difficulty. So let's go back and forth. That way you're not creating like too big of a taper on each side, or too big of a taper on one side compared to the other. And being that this is a wide band right now, it's going to be a little bit harder to measure the size, but we will adjust for that and check that size regularly. So it's close to a 7. I'm going to leave it at that for the moment. I determine how thick the band is going to, or the ring is going to be at its thickest point by measuring the biggest stone. And so the biggest stone that I have is the center stone, which is that blue sapphire. And so I need to figure out how deep that stone is. And I measure 3.63 millimeters. So, when you're setting a stone, the last thing you want to do is have the cullet, or the bottom of that stone, poke out the bottom of the ring, like making contact with the finger. So I like to have in the wax at least a millimeter tolerance there. And then as I am starting to set the stone in the wax, I'll figure out if there's room for that to go down further. So I just start off with a safe, easy 1 millimeter tolerance there. So I'm going to make this 4.63. So I'm just going to do like this, kind of sweeping score mark right here, and kind of the opposite side of that. So that score mark indicates the highest point of the ring. Okay. And just to verify the height of that, I like to set the stone, or like just kind of eyeball it and see. So yeah, there's a plenty of material there. I could set that lower if I wanted to, but for right now, since we're in the earlier stages of this carving, I'm just going to keep it there. And then I'm going to do kind of like the bottom of the ring thickness. I like to do between 1.8 and 2 millimeters. I'm going to probably do right at 2, maybe just a tad under. But here's 2 exactly. So I'll kind of work one side down to that line, and of course it's going to be tapered. So I got to look at the other side and make sure I'm doing it all right. And then I kind of eyeball, from that line. I don't need to necessarily try to do like some graduated line to that. You just kind of gotta eyeball it a little bit. And so yeah, I kind of just slowly walk walk that line up and try not to dedicate to one certain area all at once. Just kind of slowly take the whole thing down in a progression. I'm at the bottom, and then I'm going to taper the bottom of that ring so it's not as wide as the top, because it's definitely not going to be as wide as the top. But it also, I got to make sure it's the right size. So before I proceed too far in thinning this out, if I do need to remove any more wax from the inside, I should do that sooner rather than later. So I'm thinking my overall width on the bottom of this ring is going to be about 5.5 to 6 millimeters wide. So right now I'm at 16. If I want to make this 6 millimeters wide, I'd want to take 5.325 off of each side. Okay. So I got my 2 score marks. I'm going to just go in here and remove this excess wax in the bottom part of the ring. So I've made some good progress here, as you can see. Basically I'm just trying to get all the depths and the heights to their appropriate depths and heights. And that can be somewhat of a chore sometimes, like when you're starting out with that big block. Yeah. But as you start to develop the design here, it becomes much easier to do that. So I'm just going to work on this side here, trying to maintain that design as much as I can. There have been a few just minor modifications because sometimes when you're sketching something up, you're just putting stuff on paper, putting ideas on paper, and then you kind of just have to work the wax to see if those ideas are practical or if it's just needed. So I'm just gonna work this part of the sketch now. So it's usually the first 60% of the carving goes by really fast, and then the last 20% is using this tool pretty much, and then the wax pen, and the last 20% seems to take half, 50% of the total time, just because all the details involved and all that. But those details are very important, and just got to take the time to do them right. Basically, this pen here, this is a wax pen that heats up the wax and remelts it. That way I can, if I need to add more wax to a certain area, like I'm going to have to do right in here, this pen allows me to do that adding of the wax. I just picked up some of my wax dust and just kind of melt it into that area. That to be a little more curved instead of straight. So I want this outside line to match this outside line. And for me to do that, I see my high point. I'm just going to knock that down. Because basically, the wax, the more that you can, define and refine the wax model, the less time it's going to take you to finish up the rough casting. Makes sense. So there's a certain amount of trade-off involved with how much you finish the wax and how much time you spend in the metal. And those little details that make all the difference, because especially if you're, this is for a client, they would definitely want to see as much of the sketch match what's going on in the wax, and so that's a pretty crucial part of that. get this down a little bit. It's kind of in my way. The height it's at doesn't need to be that high. This is just a secondary kind of line in the design. It just adds to that movement, which I like. I like to do that. It adds to the beauty of it and creates more movement in the piece. If this weighs more than a gram, I'm going to have to just reduce it. I want it to be like around 0.7. Yeah, so I got to remove like 1/3 of a gram off that, which should be easy to do because it's still really a tall ring. There's still a lot of wax here that doesn't necessarily have to be on here.
Gotcha.
And it would essentially be all carved off or filed off in the metal. And I'm just going to measure it. So yeah, 3.2. Yeah, that could definitely be like 2.4 and be perfect. Which means it'll take down all this stuff too. That all goes by pretty fast. We are at 1.8, which that's where I want it to be at the bottom. Yeah, the bottom of that stone will not be sticking out if I stick with that height. So, if anything, I can kind of taper the bottom part if I need to remove a little bit of material. So I'm just going to smooth out my rotary tool marks, and I'll reweigh this puppy and see where we're at. So this little bead of wax I'm adding is kind of going to act like a bezel of sorts. I'm just going to use that setting. That way I don't have like this big indentation that goes in towards the stone. I want that whole surface to just be nice and flat. Okay, so now that we have the model ready to go, the next step is to get it ready to be invested in the plaster mold.